This is the Cupra Leon, a car that I've dreamt about coming to Australia for so many years, and finally it's right here next to me at Sydney Motorsport Park. We've got the keys, we're going to take it on track and see if this thing was actually worth the wait, or if it's just yet another Volkswagen Group MQB product that feels the same as everything else. Well, spoiler alert, it doesn't. Under the skin, the Leon has basically the oily bits from a Volkswagen Golf GTI Club Sport, which you can get in Europe, but you can't get here in Australia in Mark 8 form. Well, that's specifically this Leon, which is called the VZx. Underneath the bonnet, it's got a 2-litre turbo, making 221 kilowatts of power, which is enough in a front-wheel drive hot hatch like this. Thankfully, there is the tricky diff, the electronically controlled, mechanically locking limited slip differential here on the front end, which you will want, as you'll find out when we head out on track. But there's a bunch of other Cupra Leons coming to Australia as well, including an entry-level Leon V, which will probably be under 50 grand drive away with 140 kilowatts of power, and even a plug-in hybrid that will sit in the middle of the range and will offer a useful amount of electric-only driving range, which will probably be quite interesting. We'll be driving that one more towards the end of 2022. Today, I'm going to focus on the VZx, which is really one for those of us who are enthusiasts. On the channel, if it's not already there, you'll find videos on the Formentor and the Ateca SUVs. They're the practical Cupras. Today, we're going to be a bit selfish and check out the Leon, which is really for the person sitting up front. Before we head on track, we'll check out the interior, front seat, back seat, boot, and then we'll go for a drive to see what this latest addition to the hot hatch space is really like. Was it worth the wait? We'll see. Before we get going, hit subscribe, hit that notification bell. The Cupra Leon may share the basic proportions of the Volkswagen Golf and Audi A3 and S3, but inside it's like being in a different world. The shape of the dash, the materials, the colors, they really illustrate just how customizable the platform underneath this car is, right down to interior design, let alone driving dynamics, which are quite different on this compared to those cars, as we'll find out shortly. So what are we dealing with here? Well, we've got a screen which is unique to the Leon. It's not shared with the Golf, but you still do get these touch-sensitive climate controls. I don't think it's quite as bad. I think the processing power of the Leon screen is a little bit better, but still the Cupra Ateca, which has physical buttons for the climate, is probably the gold standard of these new Cupras for usability, but it's also half a generation behind in terms of tech. So this is the infotainment stack for Cupra going forward, so we might as well just learn to live with it. I think it's fine. The Beat stereo sounds really good, and wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto are very convenient. You'll probably just use that and see your own phone screen projected up onto this display. On the whole though, I got on fine with the tech in this car, especially the virtual cockpit, which has Cupra's own design, copper detailing, which is the feature color for Cupra. You can put a map there, your media, your trip information, a cool driving dynamics screen with like a G meter, all that stuff is happening behind what Cupra calls the Super Sports steering wheel, which has a flat bottom, start engine stop button here, a Cupra mode button, and kind of these interesting paddle shifters. They're not metal, but they are interesting to look at. They look like little wings, perforated detailing, copper stitching, kind of a carbon effect, and then this really menacing Cupra badge. It all looks pretty cool. It makes you feel cool sitting in this car. And you get down into petrol blue sports bucket seats, not black, but blue, really cool, matches really well with some exterior colors in particular, like the matte gray or the navy blue. And then we have power adjustment, 12-way for the driver, seat heating up here too. Panoramic sunroof, that's optional. Some people want it, some don't want weight up high, particularly in a pretty powerful hot hatch like this one. Material quality, I think, feels good. So soft up here on the dash, soft on the doors, soft armrests, stitched door grabs, that really nice adjustable armrest so you can get into a great driving position. On the whole, I think it feels a little more premium than a Golf, but not quite into Audi territory. So that's sort of where it feels like Cupra is positioned in the market, which is not a bad spot if you ask me. Practicality, we've got all this open space down here because we do have this little knobby gear shifter like a Golf, like pretty much everything in the Volkswagen Group now. Wireless charging here, little coin trays, big cup holders, so classic MQB car, lots of storage, lots of room for something that's relatively compact on the outside. And the seat itself is comfy, drops pretty low, view out's good. Not a huge amount of negatives. With the touch controls, I think you'd probably just get used to them the longer you own the car, but is a dial better? Yeah, of course. The MQB Evo platform that sits beneath the Cupra Leon, the new Golf, the Skoda Octavia, is really good because it's liberated more legroom on the whole compared to the just standard MQB cars that came before. So as you can see here, even though this is a pretty small vehicle, to be honest, I've got my seat set up for my own driving position. I'm 6 foot, so I'm not that, tall or short, but I've got good legroom. I've got good tow room, not as good as the SUVs, the Formentor or the Ateca, but still pretty good. And headroom is actually fine, even with the sunroof on this car. It's surprisingly roomy, I would say. I wouldn't want to be stuck in the middle seat, but it's usable in a pinch. We do have air vents, USB-C ports, door bins, and a flip-down armrest with 2.5 cup holders and a ski hatch as well. Now it's interesting, the ski hatch, it almost makes you pine for a version of the Leon with all-wheel drive, which would be really great for the snow, but they're all front drive. However, as we'll find out in just a moment's time, being front drive hasn't harmed the experience. Once you embrace it and lean into it, this thing is a phenomenal traditional hot hatch from behind the wheel. But before we get to that point, let's check out the boot space, be quite pragmatic. Here around the back of the Cupra Leon, you'll see we've got this full width reflector here and the Cupra badge and lettering around the back. This matte paintwork won't be to everybody's tastes, but certainly if you can garage the car, it's pretty cool. But there's a bunch of gloss treatments available as well. Now in terms of boot, the latch is in the Cupra badge and you open it up and you're like, this looks like a Volkswagen Golf boot. Yes, funny that. 380 litres of space, that's what you get, shared with a Volkswagen Golf GTI. In fact, 1 litre less. Hopefully you can live without that carton of milk. But it's big, it's square, it's practical. We've got space off to the left in terms of a little box. We could push through that ski pass-through, but then the floor itself, that actually lifts up to reveal a space saver spare and the subwoofer for the Beat stereo, which is useful. Even though this car is on really big wheels and tires, it is nice to have a space saver spare. Plenty of cars are starting to go without them now. Now, there's only one boot space for the Leon, and that's because there's no all-wheel drive option. Unlike the Volkswagen Golf, where you can get an R, or the Audi S3, all of them share similar proportions. They're all available in all-wheel drive. The Leon, strictly front-wheel drive. How does that translate to the driving dynamics? Well, we're going to find out right now. All right, latest entrant to the hot hatch segment, Cupra Leon VZx. Let's hit it. Not a bad place for a first drive, Sydney Motorsport Park. Local to me, one of Australia's best, quickest tracks, and this car's got plenty of punch, so let's see how it handles it. Into turn 2. Very adjustable chassis. Wow, quick steering, rear end pivots around, real nice. Just like a Formentor, but a lot smaller and lighter. Whoa, sounds like it's gonna take off. Really nice noise out of the 2-litre engine. Not sure how much is pumped in through the speakers. To be honest, I don't really care. That just doesn't bother me that much. I know it bothers some people, and that's fine, but you can usually turn it off in the infotainment system. You probably can on this car. I haven't concentrated too much on the little details of the infotainment system today. I've mainly looked at what it's like to drive, which I think is probably the first pivotal question. So what are we dealing with mechanically? EA888 engine, 2-litre turbocharged, petrol 4-cylinder. Good outputs here, 221 kilowatts, 400 newton meters. As a reminder, a Golf GTI has 180, 370, so we're up 41 kilowatts, which is certainly not nothing. In fact, we're not far off a Golf R. More than what a Golf R Mark 7.5 made in terms of power, which is plenty. Front-wheel drive, though, is not an issue here. Okay, it is a bone-dry day, 28 degrees, good surface. Maybe my view will change in the wet and the winter, but as it stands, this car's got loads of grip, chemical and mechanical. Coming out of the last turn at Motorsport Park here, diff just pulls you out. Hard-working, I think Volkswagen calls it VAQ, I'm not sure what Cupra calls it, but it's a electronically controlled, mechanically locking differential on the front axle. Works really well. The Golf GTI, at times, you have to kind of go looking for it. Octavia RS, I always feel like it works pretty hard, and then here in the Leon VZx, it works really hard. It just scoops this car out of corners. Works a treat. So you can be lazy, you can just pin the throttle out of a corner and the car will work it out, and the tyres have got enough grip in them. But like any classic front drive hot hatch, it's actually better to drive around the fact that the car is front wheel drive. Brake, tip it in. There we go. Just let the rear end pirouette around, and then the car is straight and ready to accelerate out of the bend. This car feels a lot lighter than some rivals. i30N has been tuned really well throughout its lifespan, but it still has this sort of heavy, kind of weapon-like nature to it, whereas the Leon is so chuckable. It's eminently chuckable. Well, it's actually, it feels a little bit Peugeot 308 GTI in that it's kind of so lightly fleet-footed that once it cops an undulation on the surface here at Motorsport Park, it does skip a little bit, but the dampers keep it under control. We don't top out or bottom out. And the suspension's impressive, adaptively damped. Stiff, but not anywhere near to the extent that it causes like understeer. And then just so much thrust on corner exit. I like the steering, quite different steering feel to a Golf or an S3 or an Octavia. Probably the best of all of them, I reckon. Lovely pointy little front end on the car. Rear end helps you out a lot. Very noticeable oversteering characteristics on the Leon. The driving position's quite low. Nice view out over the sculpted bonnet here. Steering wheel feels good in the hand. Seat's comfortable. It's actually quite quiet and quite refined. I should mention this car just has stock standard exhaust and no Brembos, just regular brakes. Brakes have been fine today. I can't say that we've been, maximum attack on track the entire time, but this thing's gone out for many sessions with journalists from other publications and myself, and not noticing any issues in the brakes now. Brembos are optional, quite a pricey option, but they would definitely give you significantly more powerful brake again. There we go. See, that's the lazy route. Just turn the steering wheel, get hard into the throttle, drive yourself out of the corner on the diff. Interestingly, the ESC tune in the Leon and all of the Cupras is really generous. You can have ESC completely on and it lets the back end of the car really move around, which is great. There is an ESC Sport setting on most of the car. See, look at that. Look at that. Oh, chef's kiss. Lovely. Can't wait to drive these things on the road, because on track they put up a really good showing. I'm like trying to find the few bumps there are at Motorsport Park to get a gauge of the ride. But it's going to take a punishing Australian country road to really bring that out. But Volkswagens, Audis and Skodas all handle it really well, so why wouldn't the Cupra? Fingers crossed. I don't really back horses. Independent journalists don't do that. But when you drive a car which has so much potential and is really fun to drive, you don't want it to have a foible on road. And I've got to reserve my final judgment for road driving, but first impressions here at Motorsport Park, very, very promising, yeah. Really like it. I haven't driven the entry-level Leon. I really want to do that. 140 kilowatt car, still the 2-litre, and 43,990 plus on roads for the entry level. Sounds pretty good, right? Sounds like it might be a better deal than a Golf R-Line, but we'll have to wait and see. VZx, yeah, it's definitely left a pleasant taste in my mouth. Let's wait a couple of months, drive it on road, and give us our final judgments at that point. But definitely, I want to know more. Really like it so far. Those are my first impressions of the new Cupra Leon VZx. Full fat trim, the most power, everything you could want in a driver's hot hatch, or is it? I think we might need a comparison of this vehicle, Golf GTI, maybe even Golf R, something like the S3, the i30N, the Focus ST. This is sounding like a pretty good day that I'm describing already. But the Cupra Leon, to me, it feels like it adds something a little bit special and a bit different to this class. The chassis is super adjustable. It's way more powerful than the Golf GTI because we can't get the Club Sport here, but it still has that kind of inherent solidity from that car, but a more bratty personality. And all of that sounds pretty good. On track, I think it's convincing. We do need a road drive to see what this vehicle is like in the real world too, and that will be coming to the channel within a couple of months. So don't forget to hit subscribe so you catch that, and the notification bell. It'll even tell you when we upload it. And as always, thank you for watching Chasing Cars.